the other thing that is worth mentioning just briefly in passing before we get on to kind of later forms of technology is that one thing that emerged as a result of music printing over the later 19th century and has become hugely important in recording and is something that is still there's a big question mark over how it all is quite going to work now with digital music is copyright. Because until the late 19th century there really was no such thing as copyright. There were agreements between different publishing houses and between different composers and orchestras and performing organisations. But the idea that you owned the thing that you wrote, and that you owned the printed version of the thing that you wrote, and that you owned the recorded version of the thing that you wrote, that's really quite a new idea. And of course, the more complicated that music technology and recording technology becomes, the more fluid the boundaries with sharing and things like Spotify and Napster and all of those.
But Spotify and Napster are two fundamentally different things. You realise that Napster is illegal. It was illegal.
Indeed.
And so as a result, we get into a situation where I personally feel like the idea of copyright becomes completely untenable as a concept.
And yet, copyright laws are tighter, and intellectual property copyright laws are tighter now than they ever have been.
But I think that's a knee-jerk reaction to record companies and intellectual property owners sort of getting very, very scared. And I think so. Obviously, this is an obvious segue into the world of digital music, which is probably what we need to talk about to finish this kind of roundup of the influence that technology's had. I feel that when we write the history of the 21st century, I think we will say that the first decade of the 21st century, really, in terms of music history, will be the time at which the period during which you could make an inordinate amount of money from selling recorded music ended. I think that is sort of becoming quite obvious. People still are making huge amounts of money, but most of the time it's not through directly selling recorded music in the way that they used to. And the way that the record companies have behaved is actually very similar to the way they behaved in the 70s and 80s when tape recorders came out for the first time. And they said, people taping music off the radio is going to kill music. These, artists are going to lose all of their income from all of this music because they see every, illegal download or a taping off the radio, or I send a file to you because, I said, it was good, you should listen to it. They would see that as a lost sale. Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting because we can compare what happened after the taping revolution, as in music didn't die, music remained. In fact, if anything, it got stronger because it allowed people to pass this stuff around from person to person. And so I guess we're at this point, and I don't know quite how you see it panning out, but we're at this point which is hugely exciting, or interesting, certainly, because it's, I think, an invitation to musicians to, once again, just the same way that they have done with all these other new things that have been invented, to actually work out how to creatively incorporate these new media and these new technologies into the work that they're doing, just the same way as the printed score, just the same way as the recorded disc. And what's exciting about that is the people who are succeeding at the moment, in my eyes, seem to be the people who are doing that most creatively. So rather than going to court and saying, well, you must take these criminal people, down, you must stop them going on the internet, you must do all this stuff, that's actually quite a boring response in my eyes.
It is a boring response, but I think the big problem is that the tape revolutionised the way that consumers deal with music, because it gave them a freedom to manipulate what was previously fixed. You can't manipulate what's on an LP, and certainly the technology was not available.
So the concept of a mixtape, which to some of our younger listeners might be a totally alien thing, but it's like if you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you quite liked, it was this big kind of cultural thing to make them a mixtape where you would choose your favourite 10 songs and put them together.
Absolutely, and the ordering was everything.
Yeah, of course.
And decorating the cover with appropriate
sort of
drawings.
Yeah,
absolutely. That was all part of it. It was, as you say, a very important cultural kind of thing to do.
You're saying that the digital thing, the YouTube, the Napster, the Spotify, etc., that's a different thing.
I'm saying it's a different thing because the difference between the digital revolution and what was happening with tape is that although both allow you to transport music away from the people who own it, if you like, the tape, by its very nature, means that the quality drops when you make the recording. That the life of the thing that you have stolen, as it were, is finite. Whereas because of the quality of a digital download, it's not quite the same in that the longevity is there in a way that
you've got that
take,
forever.
It isn't there, exactly. Yeah. And you can back it up and you can save it somewhere else. And I think that the danger is that because we live in an age where we prize music from a huge period of history that is behind us, as well as from the people who are around and can engage with the new medium and deal with technology in a creative way and make it work to their advantage, and somehow find a way around the question of property and copyright that means that they don't lose out on royalties or whatever the equivalent of royalties is going to become. For the people who are performing music that was written a long time ago, they are the people who are most likely to lose out, the new interpreters of old music, because they can't really easily change what the thing is that they are recording, and thus it's going to be about creative marketing to mean that those performers don't lose a lot of money.
I suppose there's an argument to say now that we have quite a lot of recordings of that historical repertoire, is the technology almost a bit like sort of pushing you towards finding something else to record? As in, yes, you can't change Beethoven's symphonies, and if you're going to record them again, your recording sort of goes into the shelf of the library that is Beethoven's symphony recordings, which goes, for miles and miles and miles. Everyone's recorded them. Every conductor who thinks they're serious, from Rattle to Carrie Ann to all these different people have all recorded them, because it's kind of like this enormous emotional journey that as a conductor you should probably go through. I just wonder if this sort of permanence of this thing is making us ask the question: Is that required? Do I need to go and join those ranks, or can I still, even within that interpretation of historical music, still innovate and still find something new that hasn't been recorded before, that is different, that helps us see a different thing, or find a new way of doing that? And the other thing I wanted to say, I think, before we finish, is that is it not the case that actually it's okay that making money out of selling recordings is becoming not as profitable as it was? Because all we're doing, I think, is going back to a time before a lot of this technology came in. In fact, if anything, we're going sort of full circle, where to make a living as a musician, imagine just a wandering troubadour or whatever, to make money as a musician you have to find some people who are going to pay you to play to them live, in person, person-to-person connection. And if anything, that for me is the solution to all these worries about how a musician's going to survive in the future, how is music going to survive in the future, is that in fact the one thing you can't download off the internet, off any service, whether it's legal or illegal, is the experience of being in a concert with your favourite orchestra and your favourite conductor and your favourite band playing music that you absolutely love. And I still think that in the future there will be opportunities to make money and have a career, but also continue to do fantastic things with music, because you can't digitise the experience of being close to the music that you love.
I think that's true, and I would say, by way of sort of final riposte, that of course there is nothing that matches up to the live experience. I think it's going to be interesting to see over the next couple of decades how things evolve for those people who are interpreting music that has been around for a long time, because I think everybody has something new to say about those pieces, and that's why they want to record them. And I would say that in conversation with someone who's made an awful lot of CDs of classical music recently, he brought up the idea that he doesn't consider his recordings to be musical texts in the sense of something that is fixed, that you go back to as a reference thing so that you can hear how this piece goes, which is, I think, what we tend to do, how we tend to view recordings of classical music. He said, it's a recording of how I thought this should happen on this day that I was in this church with this singer and we recorded these things, and I'm pleased with it, and that's that. And if I do it in 2 years' time in a concert in America, I will play it completely differently, because it will be a different day with a different singer in a different place, and I will feel differently about the music. And that's what's exciting, and that's why recordings and more recordings keep coming, because it's endlessly exciting and interesting to see what new things even the same person will do with the same piece of music over the course of their career as their ideas about things change.